We like to pretend we have conquered nature. We build skyscrapers, we pave roads, and we think the ground beneath our feet is just dead, solid rock. But if you drill deep enough, you realize the Earth is very much alive. And it is breathing fire. I was the lead geothermal pressure engineer at one of the most advanced, high-yield geothermal power plants on the planet. My workplace was built directly over a dormant volcanic basin. Our job was simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. We pumped millions of gallons of freezing water 3 miles straight down into the Earth's crust. The molten rock flashed that water into hyper-pressurized steam, which shot back up through our extraction pipes to spin massive, custom-built titanium turbines, generating clean electricity for millions of homes. But dealing with the Earth's mantle requires a titanium leash. That leash was the seismic fracture limit. The bedrock down there is stable, but fragile. If you pump too much water too fast, the extreme pressure and temperature shock will physically shatter the tectonic bedrock. If the rock breaks, you don't just get clean steam anymore. You get a blowout, a supersonic geyser of boiling toxic mud, corrosive volcanic acids, and liquid silica that will melt anything it touches. The plant operated flawlessly for years, respecting the breathing rhythm of the planet. Then, the board of directors hired Marcus as the new vice president of energy trading. Marcus came from Wall Street Commodities. He traded electricity like it was crypto. He didn't care about geology, thermodynamics, or safety. He only saw megawatt hours and dollar signs, and my strict pressure limits were entirely in his way. It was the second week of January. A historic, crippling blizzard hit the entire continent. The power grid was on the verge of total collapse, and because of the massive demand, the spot price of electricity skyrocketed by 800%. It was a gold rush. Every megawatt we produced was suddenly worth a fortune. Marcus stormed into the main SCADA control room. It was a heavily armored bunker vibrating with the constant, deafening roar of the steam turbines spinning outside. He didn't wear a hard hat. He wore a tailored cashmere coat, looking at the glowing telemetry screens with absolute, ravenous greed. "Engineer," he barked, pointing at the extraction gauges. "I'm looking at the live market prices. We are sitting on a gold mine, but the plant is only running at 70% capacity. The grid is begging for power, and they are paying top dollar. I want you to open the primary injection valves all the way. Pump maximum water into the crust. I want these turbines spinning at 120% capacity for the next 48 hours. I slowly took my hands off the control panel and turned my chair to look at him. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. "Marcus, that is geological suicide," I answered in a low, heavy voice, trying to make him understand the sleeping monster he was poking. "We are already at the absolute edge of the seismic fracture limit. If I open those valves and flood the mantle with that much cold water, the thermal shock will violently shatter the bedrock 3 miles below us. We won't get clean steam. We will frack the volcanic basin. It will spit up a hyper-pressurized column of boiling mud and sulfuric acid that will bypass the filters and hit the turbines at Mach 2. You will melt a $120 million turbine array into radioactive slag. You will destroy the plant." Marcus leaned over the console, invading my space, his eyes wide with that arrogant, reckless blindness that only finance executives possess. "You engineers are all the exact same. You build a Ferrari and then refuse to take it out of first gear," he whispered venomously. "It's just hot rocks and water. The Earth isn't going to break just because we push it a little harder. I've traded energy for 15 years and I know when to cash in. This is a direct corporate order. Either you unlock the software and open those injection valves right now, or I will have security physically drag you out into the snow, I will fire you on the spot, and I'll have an intern push the damn levers." In the heavy industrial sector, gravity and pressure do not negotiate with stockbrokers. I knew with terrifying, empirical certainty that he was about to turn the power plant into an artificial volcano. But the threat of termination demanded the most lethal countermeasure in an engineer's arsenal: cryptographically certified malicious compliance. "I am not going to shatter the Earth's crust under my professional license, Marcus," I replied with dead, robotic coldness, standing up and stepping away from the master console. "But since you are the VP of energy trading, you will execute the override command yourself." I pointed to the heavy, reinforced keyboard. "You will insert your biometric corporate ID card. You will draft a manual override, disabling the seismic fracture limit and forcing the injection pumps to maximum capacity. You will leave a written record stating that you explicitly reject my technical warning regarding bedrock fracture, volcanic blowouts, and the destruction of the titanium turbine array. And you will digitally sign that you assume, on a legal, personal, and criminal level, absolute responsibility for the total loss of the facility and any environmental damage." Marcus let out a loud, arrogant scoff. "If this cowardly bureaucratic theater makes you feel better, I'll sign it. You are terrified of making real money, he mocked. He slammed his ID card into the reader, typed the suicidal command while completely ignoring the flashing red seismic warnings on the screen, and hit execute. There you go. Now, open the valves and let the earth bleed. I sat back down. I engaged the primary pumps. On the screens, the water flow meters spiked. The digital predator had just been unleashed into the earth. For the first hour, Marcus was pacing around the control room in pure euphoria. The power output meters climbed higher and higher. The digital counter showing our hourly profit was spinning so fast it was a blur. He was making millions of dollars an hour. But beneath our feet, 3 miles deep in the absolute darkness of the crust, the unforgiving laws of thermodynamics were doing their job. At exactly the 90-minute mark, the noise in the control room changed. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was a low-frequency rumble. A vibration so deep and massive that you didn't hear it with your ears. You felt it in your teeth, your bones, and your spine. It was the terrifying whisper of 10,000 tons of solid rock snapping in half. On my monitors, the seismometers spiked into the black zone. What is that shaking? Marcus asked, his arrogant smile instantly vanishing as the coffee in his mug began to ripple violently. You just fractured the bedrock, Marcus, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. The mantle is collapsing. Outside the armored glass of the bunker, the nightmare began. The extraction pipes, which normally carried clean, invisible, high-pressure steam, suddenly turned pitch black. The fractured crust had released a subterranean nightmare. A supersonic geyser of boiling liquid mud, dissolved granite, and highly corrosive sulfuric gas shot up the 3-mile pipe. It hit the massive $120 million titanium turbines at twice the speed of sound. The sound of the destruction was apocalyptic. It sounded like a jet engine being fed through a metal shredder. The boiling mud and acid acted like liquid sandpaper. In a matter of seconds, the perfectly balanced titanium turbine blades were absolutely shredded, sparking violently and tearing through their own steel casings. A blinding cloud of toxic yellow, sulfuric steam erupted from the turbine hull, melting the heavy industrial steel as if it were made of wax. The massive generators screeched in agony, caught fire, and then completely seized up, plunging the entire facility into a dead, terrifying silence, broken only by the hissing of the boiling earth. The power output plummeted to zero. Marcus was slumped against the reinforced glass, his face ashen, trembling violently as he stared at the smoking, melted ruins of the multi-million-dollar turbine array. His brain was completely unable to process that his greed had just annihilated the facility in less than 2 hours. By dawn, the blizzard had cleared, and a fleet of black corporate helicopters landed outside the bunker. The CEO of the energy conglomerate, wearing a hazmat suit and looking like he was ready to commit murder, stormed into the control room flanked by corporate lawyers and federal environmental investigators. Marcus, shivering in the corner, saw his entire life collapsing and reacted with the pathetic instinct of a cornered rat. It was the engineer. Marcus screamed hysterically, pointing a shaking finger at me while the federal agents secured the room. He didn't monitor the pressure. The earth shifted and he didn't close the valves in time. He blew up the plant. The CEO glared at me, his eyes burning with a lethal fury, desperately looking for a scapegoat to feed to the federal investigators. I didn't even blink. I pulled up the encrypted SCADA core log on the main projector screen, casting it in bright white letters across the dark room. There was his corporate death warrant. VP command, permanent override of the seismic fracture limit. Injection pumps forced to 100% capacity. Explicit rejection of the technical warning regarding bedrock fracture, volcanic blowouts, and turbine destruction. Legal, personal, and criminal assumption of any financial loss and environmental damage. And right below it, the unalterable biometric signature of Marcus's own corporate ID card. The CEO read the text out loud. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt like the crushing pressure of the deep earth. Marcus, the CEO whispered, his voice dripping with an icy, bottomless hatred. You ignored the absolute, terrifying laws of geology because you actually believed that the Earth's mantle was a spreadsheet you could manipulate. You just melted $120 million in turbines, you poisoned the groundwater, and you destroyed this plant permanently. You are fired. The CEO turned to the federal agents. Take him. We are pressing full charges for industrial sabotage and criminal negligence. I want his accounts frozen, his assets seized, and I want him to spend the rest of his life paying for the steel he just melted. Marcus was dragged out of the bunker in handcuffs, hyperventilating and sobbing, heading straight into a financial and legal abyss from which he would never ever return. I was entirely cleared by the federal investigation, shielded completely by my malicious compliance log. Today, I work as a senior safety inspector for the Department of Energy. And I can assure you, when I walk into a control room and tell an executive that the ground beneath them has a limit, absolutely no one dares to ask me to push the red line. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe for more.